Mara kept scrubbing even after the water turned pink. Her hands shook so badly, the broom kept slipping across the porch boards, but she forced herself to keep moving. The stain sat deep inside the cracks like the wood wanted to keep it. Every few seconds she looked toward the road, then back down again. A wagon rattled past slowly. Nobody waved. Two women stood beside the fence across the field, pretending to hang sheets. She's still cleaning it. Looks worse every hour. You think he hit her first? I think he ain't coming back. Mara heard every word. She kept sweeping. The front door creaked behind her. Old Ruth stepped outside holding a bucket. She stopped the moment she saw the porch. Lord above, Ruth whispered. Don't. You need the doctor? I need people to mind their business. Ruth lowered the bucket carefully. Sheriff came by twice already. I know. He asked about your husband. He left. At night? Yes. With no horse? Mara looked at her hard enough to end the questions. Ruth nodded once and walked back inside without another word. Hoofbeats echoed somewhere beyond the trees. Slow, patient, Mara froze. The sheriff rode along the fence line again, watching the ranch from a distance. He never crossed the gate, he just circled. One hand rested on the saddle horn while the other stayed near his revolver. He looked at the porch, then at the barn, then at Mara. You planning to scrub through the wood? He asked. You planning to arrest somebody? That depends. On what? Whether your husband comes home? He ain't missing. No? He left. The sheriff spat into the dirt. Funny thing about leaving. Folks usually pack first. Mara gripped the broom tighter. You got proof of something? Not yet. Then ride on. He studied her face a long moment. You hear anything last night? No. Gunshot? No. Screaming? No. You always lie this calm? She stepped closer to the edge of the porch. You always circle women like a buzzard. For a second, he almost smiled. Then his eyes moved toward the tool shed near the barn. Mara noticed immediately. You been in there? He asked. No, door's open. It sticks. You should close it. You should leave. The sheriff tipped his hat and turned the horse away, but not before glancing once more at the porch stain. Mara watched him disappear past the dead cotton trees. Only then did she breathe again. She carried the bucket toward the well. Mud clung around the stones. One small footprint sat beside the water crank. Barefoot, child-sized, Mara stopped cold. The footprint pointed toward the barn. No, she whispered. She looked around the yard quickly. Empty, the footprint was fresh. A low creak came from inside the barn. Mara backed away immediately. The large door carried black scorch marks near the handles like somebody once tried burning it shut. Another creak. She hurried back toward the porch. A horse approached from the road she had not been watching. Dark coat, dust-covered saddlebags. The rider looked worn down by distance more than age. He slowed near the gate. You all right? Mara said nothing. The man studied the porch stain without staring directly at it. Most people looked too hard. He did not. You got water? He asked. There's a well. Sheriff passed me down the road. He does that. He seemed interested in this place. Mara crossed her arms. You passing through or asking questions? Passing through. Then pass. The stranger nodded slowly, climbed off his horse and walked toward the well anyway. Mara almost warned him about the footprint but stopped herself. He crouched near the stones. What happened here? He asked quietly. Nothing. That footprint says otherwise. Her stomach tightened. You see things you shouldn't. Sometimes. He touched one of the black burn marks on the barn door. Fire too. Old accident. You got lots of accidents. Mara stared at him carefully now. He had tired eyes but steady hands. A rifle rested behind his saddle, though he carried himself like a man trying not to use it anymore. You got a name? She asked. Elias. You always wander onto ranches uninvited? Only the strange ones. Before Mara could answer, the barn creaked again. Both of them looked toward it. You got animals inside? Elias asked. Not anymore. The sound stopped. Mara suddenly realized the tool shed door stood open wider than before. She had not touched it. Elias noticed her looking. Someone else here? No. You sure? Yes. You don't sound sure. Ruth burst through the front door again. "Mara, what? There's men walking beyond the north fence." Mara turned quickly. Empty fields stretched toward the trees, but movement shifted far back in the grass. Boots. Slow steps, circling Ilia's, straightened beside the well. "Friends of yours?" "No." The steps stopped, then started again somewhere else. Ruth whispered, "I heard them last night too." Mara felt the broom slipping from her fingers. "Get inside." "What about you?" Ruth asked. Mara looked toward the sheriff's road. Nobody there now. Then she looked at Elias. He understood before she spoke. "You offering shelter or just conversation?" she asked. "Shelter." "You ask questions?" "Only if you want me to." Mara stared at the ranch, at the porch, at the barn door hanging half open in the distance. Then the boots sounded again behind the house. "Closer now." "Fine," she said quietly. One night, Elias nodded once and moved for his horse. Mara climbed into the wagon beside him without looking back at Ruth. The wheels rolled slowly down the road while the ranch faded behind them in the dark. Then the barn door slammed shut by itself. Mara turned sharply toward the sound. Something moved behind the door, watching. Elias heard it too. He pulled the wagon reins tighter but did not stop. Mara kept staring at the barn while the porch lantern swayed alone in the windless dark. For one terrible second, she thought she saw a little hand pressed against the loft window. Then it vanished. Ruth remained frozen beside the porch steps, clutching the bucket against her chest. Nobody spoke again after that. The ranch disappeared behind the trees, but Mara felt eyes following the wagon through the night. The barn door slammed shut behind them, so hard the sound rolled across the fields like a gunshot. Mara jerked around in the wagon seat. Elias grabbed the reins tighter but kept the horses moving. The porch lantern behind them still swung slowly beside the ranch house. Then another sound came from the road ahead. Horse hooves. The sheriff stepped out from the dark trees and blocked the narrow trail. His horse breathed steam into the cold air while he studied both of them without speaking. "Where you headed?" he asked. Ilias answered first. "North." "With her?" "Yes." The sheriff looked at Mara. "You leaving your ranch unattended after all this?" "I ain't asking permission. You running?" "No." "Looks like running." Ilias kept one hand near the rifle beside him. The sheriff noticed. "You her kin?" the sheriff asked. "No, then why help her?" "Because nobody else did." Silence settled between them. The sheriff's eyes narrowed slightly. Like that answer bothered him more than a lie would have. "You got a name?" he asked Elias. "Elias, last name? Don't use it anymore. That's supposed to impress me?" "No." The sheriff looked back toward the ranch road behind them. "You hear that barn door slam?" "Yes," Elias said. "You see anybody?" "No." Mara finally spoke. "Move aside." The sheriff ignored her. "Your husband still missing?" "Yes." "You still pretending you don't know why there's blood on your porch?" Her jaw tightened. "You got proof of something?" "Not yet." "Then stop circling my house like a damn vulture." For a second nobody moved. Then the sheriff slowly guided his horse aside. "If either of you disappears by morning," he said, "I'll assume the other one buried you." Elias snapped the reins once. The wagon rolled past him without another word. Mara kept staring forward until the sheriff disappeared behind the trees. "You trust him?" Elias asked quietly. "No, you trust me?" "No." "Fair enough." The road narrowed into rough woods where dead branches scratched the wagon wheels. Mara noticed Elias checking behind them every few minutes. "You think he followed us?" she asked. "Maybe." "You scared of him?" "No." "Then what?" Elias looked toward the dark tree line. "People don't circle houses all night unless they're waiting for something." Neither of them spoke again after that. The cabin appeared almost an hour later beyond a shallow creek, small, crooked, hidden between heavy trees. One lantern burned beside the porch steps. Though Elias had clearly not been there for days, Mara climbed down slowly. "You live here alone?" "Yes." "No wife? No family?" "Not anymore." Inside, the cabin smelled like smoke and old wood. A rusted stove sat against one wall beside shelves packed with jars and tools. Mara immediately noticed strange carvings cut into the support beams near the ceiling, circles, lines crossing through them. Burn marks around the edges. Her breathing slowed. Ilias noticed her staring. "What? I've seen those before." "Where?" "Behind my barn." His face changed slightly. "Burned into the wood?" "Yes. You sure?" "I scrubbed around them for years." Ilias set down his rifle carefully. "Who made them?" "I don't know. You ever ask your husband?" "He told me not to. Did you listen?" At first. The cabin suddenly creaked underneath them. Mara froze. A slow dragging sound moved beneath the floorboards. Ilias reached for the lantern. "Probably rats." "That ain't rats." The sound stopped immediately. Both of them listened. Nothing.
You got a cellar?
Mara asked. "No? You sure?" "Yes." Another creak echoed under the floor. Closer this time, Mara stepped backward. "Somebody followed us. No horse outside." "Maybe they walked." Ilias moved toward the front door and checked the darkness beyond the porch. Empty woods, still trees. "You can sleep inside," he said. "I'll stay out here." "You think that makes me feel safer?" "No." "Then why do it?" "Because you look ready to bolt every time the house breathes." Mara sat carefully near the stove without taking off her coat. Her eyes kept drifting toward the symbols carved into the walls. "My husband used to meet men at night," she said quietly. Ilias stayed near the door. "What kind of men?" "Governor's men, deputies too sometimes." "What for?" "He handled transport." "Transport of what?" She looked down at her hands. "Women." The room went still. Ilias spoke softly now. "Missing women?" "I didn't know at first." "But later you did." "Yes." "You tell anybody?" "No." "Why?" "Because one girl came back." Ilias turned fully toward her. "Came back from where?" She wouldn't say. "What happened to her?" "She drowned herself in our well 3 days later." The floor creaked again, longer this time. Mara whispered. "You heard it too?" "Yes." A heavy knock suddenly hit the cabin wall from outside. Once, hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling. Ilias grabbed the rifle immediately. Another knock, then silence. Mara backed toward the stove. "Don't open it." "I wasn't planning to." They waited. Nothing moved outside now. No horses, no voices, just trees rubbing softly together. Then came a sound that drained the color from Mara's face completely. A little girl humming soft. Slow, right outside the cabin window. Ilias looked toward her sharply. "You know that song?" Mara could barely breathe. "My daughter used to sing it." The humming continued beyond the glass while something small moved past the window in the dark. Mara stepped toward the window before Ilias caught her arm. His grip stayed firm but careful. "Don't," he whispered. The humming drifted farther across the trees, then closer again, like whoever made it kept circling the cabin. Mara felt tears rising before she could stop them. "She died 6 years ago," she said. "Fever took her in 2 days." Ilias loosened his grip slowly. "Maybe somebody knows the song." Mara shook her head. Nobody else heard her sing it. Outside, the humming stopped completely. Then came the sound of tiny footsteps crossing the porch boards directly beneath the window that night. The tiny footsteps stopped beneath the cabin window. Mara pulled free from Ilias and rushed toward the door before he could stop her. She yanked it open hard enough to slam the wall behind it. Nobody stood outside. Only mud. Small barefoot tracks crossed the porch boards and disappeared into the trees beyond the creek. Mara stepped into the cold darkness immediately. "Wait," Ilias said. "She's out there." "No." "You heard her." "I heard something." Mara kept staring at the tracks. "That was my little girl." Ilias grabbed the lantern from the hook beside the door and followed her into the woods. The flame shook with each step across wet leaves. The footprints stayed clear in the mud ahead of them. Too small for an adult, too fresh for Mara to ignore. "She used to walk barefoot at night," Mara whispered. "Drove her father crazy. Don't do this to yourself." "You think I'm crazy?" "I think grief lies." The footprints curved deeper between the trees. The woods grew tighter around them until the cabin light vanished completely behind dark branches. Ilias slowed near a thick trunk scarred with black markings. Mara lifted the lantern higher. Symbols covered the bark. Old cattle brands burned deep into the wood. Some looked faded with age. Others looked fresh. "What is this?" she asked quietly. Elias did not answer. She moved toward another tree. More brands. More burned cuts. Row after row stretching deeper into the woods like grave markers. Then she saw one she recognized immediately. A circle with a broken cross through the center. Her stomach turned cold. "That belongs to the governor," she whispered. Elias looked away. Mara stared at him hard now. "You knew him?" "Everybody knew him." "That ain't what I asked." Silence dragged between them. "You worked for him," she said. Elias finally nodded once. Mara stepped backward. "You lied to me. I left years ago." "That don't answer anything." "I enforced transport routes." "For the women?" "Yes." The lantern crackled softly between them. Mara's voice dropped lower. "You helped take them?" "At first." "At first?" "I thought they were workers, drifters, girls crossing through. And later?" Elias swallowed hard. "Later I saw what happened after delivery." Mara stared at him without blinking. "What did you see?" One girl tried running. He looked down at the muddy ground. They dragged her behind a grain shed while we listened. The woods felt colder after that. Mara folded her arms tightly. "So why leave?" "Because there were children." He said it quietly enough to almost disappear into the trees. One deputy laughed while they beat a girl half to death. Couldn't have been older than 14. Elias rubbed his jaw slowly. "I put a bullet in him and disappeared before sunrise." "You expect pity?" "No." "Then what do you expect?" "Nothing." The footprints suddenly stopped beside another marked tree. No trail forward, no return tracks. Mara raised the lantern higher, breathing harder now. "Where did she go?" Elias looked around carefully. "Nobody was here. She was, you wanted her to be." Mara turned away before he could see tears rising again. Somewhere far off, a branch cracked in the darkness. Elias lowered his voice immediately. "We need to leave." "Why?" "Because these markings ain't old." Back at the cabin, dawn pushed weak gray light through the windows. Mara had not slept, neither had Elias. He sat cleaning his revolver while she stared at the carvings on the wall again. "You think my husband worked with them willingly?" she asked. "Yes, you answered that fast." "Men don't transport women by accident." Mara looked down at the floorboards. "He changed after our daughter died." "How?" He stopped praying. "Stopped touching me. Started taking rides at night." She paused. "Then the governor started visiting our ranch." Elias looked up sharply. "Personally? Twice that I saw." "What did they talk about?" "Money mostly. Land too." A heavy knock interrupted them. Both froze. Elias stood slowly and opened the door halfway. Ruth stood outside, wrapped in a shawl, breathing hard. "You need to come back," she told Mara. "Why?" "Town's talking." "About what?" "About your husband." Mara stepped closer. "What are they saying?" Ruth hesitated. "Sheriff says there was fighting before your husband disappeared." "There was." He says neighbors heard screaming. Mara stayed silent. Ruth lowered her voice. "He's telling folks you killed him during a drunken fight and buried the body somewhere on the ranch." Elias muttered under his breath. "Damn fool." Mara grabbed her coat immediately. "I'm going back." "That's stupid," Elias said. "It's my house. It might be a crime scene. It was my life before it was theirs." The ranch looked worse in daylight. Crows covered the fence posts. The porch stain had darkened overnight despite all her scrubbing. Mara stepped inside carefully while Elias checked the barn. Ruth lingered near the doorway. "Sheriff searched already." "What did he take?" "Nothing I saw." Mara moved toward the kitchen table. One chair lay overturned exactly where her husband left it 3 nights earlier. Her eyes drifted toward the loose floorboard beneath the stove. She froze. Her husband never let anyone near that spot. Slowly she knelt and pried the board upward with a knife. Bundles of papers filled the hidden space underneath. Ledgers, names, dates, pavements. Mara flipped through them with growing horror. Girls listed beside cattle counts, landowners beside burial sites, psalms paid beside sheriff departments. Mara flipped another page and found children's initials beside wagon routes. Some names had crosses beside them. Others had the word delivered written beside county lines. "What does delivered mean?" Ruth asked. Nobody answered. Elias took one ledger carefully. "These marks beside the names, they are brands. Brands for cattle? No, for ownership." Mara felt sick. "My husband kept records of this? He wasn't keeping records," Elias said. "He was protecting himself." A floorboard creaked somewhere deeper inside the house. All three of them looked toward the hallway at once. "Ruth," Mara whispered, "you came alone?" "Yes. Then who's upstairs?" The sound came again. Slow footsteps crossing the bedroom above them, while dust drifted softly from the ceiling onto the kitchen table. A shadow moved outside near the well. They looked up together. The sheriff stood beside the stones, watching silently. Something glinted in his fingers. Mara stepped onto the porch slowly. Her breath caught immediately. Her husband's missing wedding ring rested in the sheriff's hand, while he stared at her without a word. The sheriff stood beside the well, turning the wedding ring between his fingers while Mara stared from the porch. Elias stepped down beside her with one hand already tightening near his revolver. "You find that on my property?" Mara asked. The sheriff looked down into the black water below. "Found it where your husband should been." Then he dropped the ring. Mara lunged toward the well instinctively as the tiny splash disappeared into darkness. "No," she whispered. The sheriff grabbed the rope crank before she could touch it. "Don't draw water here." Elias moved fast after that. His fist slammed against the sheriff's jaw, hard enough to stagger him sideways into the stones. The sheriff reached for his gun immediately, but Elias drove him backward before he could pull it free. "You son of a bitch!" "Elias! Ilias!" Mara shouted. The sheriff spat blood into the dirt. "You protecting murderers now?" Ilias raised his fist again. Mara caught his arm before he could swing. "Stop! He's baiting you." He dropped her husband's ring into a grave. Mara tightened her grip harder. "I said stop." For a long second, Elias stayed frozen with anger burning across his face. Then, slowly, he stepped back. The sheriff straightened himself carefully while keeping one hand near his holster. "You got a temper for a drifter," he muttered. "You got a mouth for a dead man." The sheriff looked toward Mara again. "Town's already talking. Folks think you killed him. I didn't. Then where is he?" "I don't know. That ledger says otherwise." Mara's chest tightened. "You read it?" "I read enough." The sheriff climbed onto his horse slowly. "You keep digging through those records and more people die." He pulled the reins tighter. Sometimes silence keeps a town standing. Then he rode away through the dead grass without looking back. Elias rubbed his knuckles while Mara stared into the well. "You shouldn't have hit him," she said. "He wanted me to." "Yes, I still meant it." Mara almost smiled before catching herself. Inside the ranch house, the air felt heavier than before. Ruth had already gone home. Shadows stretched long across the kitchen floor, while the uncovered ledgers sat open on the table. Elias looked through another page carefully. "Your husband moved women through 3 counties." "I know. You knew before now?" Mara nodded slowly. "Not at first." "When then?" "The night one girl begged me not to let them take her." Elias looked up. "She was maybe 16, Mara whispered. "Covered in mud, wouldn't stop shaking." Mara folded her arms tightly across herself. "My husband locked her inside the tool shed until the wagon arrived. You tried helping her." "I brought water." "That all?" Tears filled her eyes immediately. "What else was I supposed to do?" Elias said nothing. The front door creaked open by itself. Both of them turned sharply. Wind moved softly through the hallway, though every window remained shut. Mara whispered, "That door keeps doing that." Elias walked over and closed it again. "Old hinges." "No." "What? It only opens at night." A loud thud suddenly came from the barn outside. Then another. The horses screamed. Both rushed onto the porch. Inside the barn, the animals slammed wildly against their stalls while kicking at empty air. Elias grabbed a lantern. "Stay here." "No." They crossed the yard together. The barn smelled wrong the moment they stepped inside. Wet dirt. Smoke. Something rotten underneath both. The horses trembled violently. What scared them? Mara whispered. Elias lifted the lantern higher. Nothing I can see. Then came the sound again, scraping, slow, heavy, directly beneath the barn floor. Mara stepped backward immediately. You hear that? Yes. The scraping dragged deeper below them like someone pulling a shovel through packed dirt. Then silence. One horse suddenly reared so hard it snapped part of the stall door loose. Get outside, Elias said. They hurried back toward the house while darkness settled over the ranch. Mara could still hear faint scraping beneath the ground even after reaching the porch. Later that night they sat near the cold stove with the ledgers spread around them. Elias read names quietly while Mara stared at the floor. My husband wanted out, she finally said. Elias looked up. Out of what? All of it. What changed? He transported a mother and little girl last winter. Mara swallowed hard. The child looked like ours. Elias stayed silent. He started drinking after that. Started talking about confession. Her voice lowered further. Governor's men threatened him. Did he believe them? Yes. You think they killed him? I think somebody did. Elias studied her carefully now. Did you kill him? No. Did you watch? Mara closed her eyes. Yes. The room fell still except for the ticking lantern flame. What happened? Elias asked softly. He argued with two men behind the barn. Tears slipped down her face now. One hit him with a shovel. She pressed trembling fingers against her mouth. I stayed inside. Why? Because I was afraid. Another scraping sound interrupted them, closer now, directly beneath the kitchen floorboards. Both froze. Elias stood slowly and lifted the lantern down toward the floor. One loose board near the stove shifted slightly upward on its own. Mara whispered, There's something under there. Together they pried the board loose. A narrow stairway disappeared into darkness beneath the house. The smell rising from below made Mara cover her mouth immediately. Burned fabric, rot old earth. Elias climbed first with the lantern. Mara followed behind him into the hidden root cellar below the ranch. Children's shoes covered one corner. Burned dresses hung from nails along the wall. A rusted deputy badge rested beside broken chains on a wooden table. Mara stared at the badge while Elias searched through another stack of hidden papers nearby. Then he stopped completely. What? Mara asked. Elias handed her a ledger page silently. One name sat near the bottom, beside a burial marker and transport payment. Clara Bell, the sheriff's sister. The name sat on the ledger page while dirt walls closed around them. Mara stared at Clara Bell written in faded ink beside a payment total and a burial mark. Above them, floorboards creaked suddenly. Elias blew out the lantern immediately. Darkness swallowed the cellar. Footsteps moved slowly across the kitchen overhead. Mara held her breath. Another creak. The sheriff's voice drifted faintly through the house. You down there? Neither answered. Elias leaned close beside her. Stay quiet. The sheriff walked across the kitchen again. A chair scraped loudly against the floor. Then silence settled above them, long enough for Mara to hear her own pulse. Finally, the sheriff spoke again. I know you found something, Mara whispered. He knows. Yes. Another long pause passed before footsteps moved toward the stove. The loose floorboard shifted open above them. Pale lantern light spilled into the cellar. The sheriff looked down at them without surprise. Well, he muttered, guess we're done pretending. Elias lifted the revolver slowly. You first. The sheriff barely glanced at the gun. If I wanted you dead, I would have burned this house already. Makara climbed halfway up the stairs. Clara Bell was your sister. The sheriff's jaw tightened hard enough to show through the beard. Yes, you never told anybody. Nobody asked the right questions. Elias kept the gun raised. I knew girls vanished. And you covered it up anyway. The sheriff looked toward Mara instead. Ask her husband why. Mara's face hardened instantly. He's gone. Convenient. You think I protected him? You slept beside him. I survived beside him. The words echoed sharply through the cellar. The sheriff looked at her differently after that, less angry, more tired. You hear them crying at night? He asked quietly. Mara swallowed hard. Sometimes, and you still stayed. I had nowhere else. The sheriff climbed slowly down into the cellar. He stared at the burned dresses hanging against the dirt walls. My sister disappeared 20 years ago, he said. Governor told everybody she ran off with gamblers. His eyes moved toward the tiny shoes piled in the corner. I found one of her ribbons near the old transport road 3 weeks later. Why hide all this? Mara asked. Because every ranch family in the county had blood tied to it. He laughed bitterly. You arrest one man around here and 10 others pull guns. Ilias lowered the revolver slightly. So you played loyal sheriff. I played patient sheriff. Mara held the ledger tighter. You let women disappear while waiting. I needed proof. You had bodies. Bodies don't convict governors. Silence settled again. Dirt shifted softly somewhere deeper beneath the cellar walls. Mara looked around nervously. You hear that? The sheriff nodded once. House settles at night. No, she whispered. That's digging. The sound stopped immediately. Ilias stepped toward another stack of papers near the back wall. There's more here. He spread several maps across the wooden table. Old ranch routes crossed through the county toward abandoned grain silos outside town. Small marks circled the locations beside payment totals. The sheriff stared at the maps. Jesus, you know this place? Elias asked. Yes, what is it? The sheriff pointed toward one marked silo near the river. Governor bought those properties years ago after the rail lines died. Mara studied the notes carefully. These numbers beside the names. They match transport dates. Ilias looked toward the sheriff. You think prisoners were kept there? The sheriff's silence answered first. Then came shouting outside. All three looked upward instantly. A sharp orange glow flashed through cracks in the floorboards overhead. Mara's eyes widened. The barn. They rushed upstairs together. Flames tore through the barn roof so fast the night sky pulsed orange above the ranch. Horses screamed from inside while sparks exploded into the wind. Water buckets! The sheriff shouted. Elias grabbed Mara's arm before she could run forward. It's collapsing. There's somebody in there. You don't know that. I heard movement earlier. The sheriff dragged one terrified horse from the side gate while burning beams crashed behind him. Stay back, he yelled. Mara pulled free from Elias anyway and sprinted toward the smoke. Mara, Elias shouted. She disappeared inside before either man could stop her. Heat slammed into her instantly. Smoke rolled thick across the stalls while flames climbed the walls. One horse kicked wildly against a locked gate near the back. Mara forced it open and slapped the animal hard enough to send it running outside. Then she heard coughing deeper inside the barn. Human. Weak. Hello, she shouted. No answer came. She moved toward the hay storage while smoke burned tears from her eyes. The coughing stopped suddenly. Beneath loose hay near the rear wall, something pale showed through the straw. A hand. Mara froze. Flames cracked loudly above her while she dropped beside the body and pulled hay away desperately. Her husband stared upward from beneath the straw, dead skin gray, eyes half collapsed inward. Mara stumbled backward in horror. No. The smell hit her a second later, rot hidden beneath chemicals and burned oil. He had been there for months. Ilias reached her through the smoke and grabbed her shoulders. We need to move. She pointed weakly toward the body. Ilias uncovered more of the corpse silently. The sheriff arrived moments later beside them and stopped cold. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Mara stared at the corpse while sparks drifted across the barn ceiling above them. Her knees gave out slowly beneath her. Elias caught her before she hit the ground. You knew? The sheriff asked. No, Mara whispered. I thought they took him. The sheriff pulled back part of the coat sleeve. Deep black bruising still marked the dead man's neck beneath the decay. He was beaten first, he muttered. Elias looked around the burning barn carefully. Somebody hid him here after. For months, the sheriff said. Mara wiped smoke and tears from her face. Then who kept riding past the ranch at night? Nobody answered. A loud crack split through the roof beams overhead. Ilias hauled Mara upright again. Move now. They dragged themselves outside seconds before part of the loft collapsed into flames behind them. Townspeople gathered near the fences, watching silently while the barn burned hotter against the dark sky. Nobody stepped forward to help. Nobody asked questions. The sheriff stood beside Mara near the well, breathing hard, while ash drifted across the yard like black snow around them tonight. Mara looked toward the open barn doors again. For one terrible second, she saw movement behind the flames. Then the shape disappeared completely, leaving only burning wood collapsing inside stalls while horses screamed beyond smoke outside. The barn roof groaned above them while Mara collapsed beside her husband's body in the dirt. Heat rolled across the yard hard enough to sting her face, but she could not stop staring at the corpse lying half-covered beneath the smoke. Townspeople lined the fences silently. Nobody crossed onto the property. Nobody offered help. Elias crouched beside her. "You need to move." "That's him," she whispered. "I know. That's really him." The sheriff pulled a burned beam aside with his boot while sparks drifted upward into the dark. "He's been dead longer than anybody knew." Mara looked toward him sharply. "How long? Months, maybe?" "No," the sheriff glanced back at the burning barn. "Body was treated with lye and oil. Somebody wanted him hidden. Who? That's the question." A loud crash echoed inside the barn as part of the loft collapsed inward. Flames burst through the roof completely now. The watching townspeople stepped farther back from the heat. Mara slowly stood on shaking legs. "They burned it to erase something." Elias nodded once. "Or somebody." The sheriff looked toward the house where the ledgers still sat hidden beneath loose floorboards. "Get the records." "You trust us now?" Elias asked. "I trust the dead less." Mara wiped smoke from her face and headed toward the porch. Several townsmen near the fence immediately looked away from her. She heard whispers moving through the crowd. She knew. Woman stayed quiet for years. She's just as guilty. Mara stopped halfway across the yard and faced them directly. "Then come say it closer." Nobody moved, inside the house. The floor still trembled faintly beneath her boots, like something underground kept shifting deeper below the ranch. Mara grabbed the ledgers while Elias filled sacks with loose papers and maps from the cellar. The sheriff stood in the doorway. "Those silos in the records. Weekonite?" Mara asked. "Yes. You think anybody's still there?" The sheriff looked toward the burning barn outside. "If the governor torched this place, he's cleaning house." 3 horses carried them north, beneath a sky full of drifting ash. The sheriff rode ahead without speaking, while Elias stayed close beside Mara along the dark trail. "You sure about this?" Elias asked quietly. "No, then why go?" Mara held the ledger tighter against her coat. "Because I'm tired of pretending I didn't see things." The abandoned grain silos appeared beyond dead fields near the river. 4 giant towers leaned crooked against the darkness, while rusted chains rattled softly in the wind. The sheriff dismounted first. "Place should be empty." "It don't look empty," Mara whispered. Fresh wagon tracks cut through the mud near the entrance. Elias drew his revolver slowly. "Stay behind me." Inside, rotten grain covered the concrete floor. The air smelled wet and stale, like something trapped underground too long. Mara noticed ribbons tied around rust pipes beside the walls, red, blue, yellow, faded with age. "What are those for?" she asked. Nobody answered. The sheriff found a metal hatch hidden beneath feed sacks. He pulled it open slowly. Cold air breathed upward from the darkness below. A staircase disappeared underground. Elias looked toward Mara. "You can stay here." "No." "You don't owe these people anything." "Yes, I do." They descended carefully beneath the silos while lantern light shook across narrow concrete walls. The tunnels below stretched far beyond what should have fit beneath the fields above. Hallways branched endlessly through darkness, Mara whispered. "This place is too big." The sheriff nodded grimly. "Thought the same thing first time. You've been here before?" "Years ago. Couldn't prove nothing." Names covered the tunnel walls. Hundreds of them carved into concrete beside dates and tally marks. Women's names. Children's initials, some scratched so deep they cracked the surface around them. Mara touched one carefully. They were counting days. Bones crunched softly beneath Elias's boot. Everyone froze. Feed sacks covered part of the tunnel floor nearby. The sheriff pulled one aside slowly. Human bones rested underneath small ones. Mara turned away immediately, covering her mouth. Ilias stared deeper into the tunnel. There's more. The underground chambers widened farther ahead into old storage rooms lined with rusted cages. Torn blankets still covered the floors. Water buckets sat overturned beside chains bolted into concrete. Then came a weak sound from the darkness. Breathing, the sheriff lifted the lantern higher. Hello? A figure moved slowly behind one of the cages, old, thin, barefoot. A woman stepped into the light, blinking hard against it. Gray hair hung in knots around her face while bruises covered both wrists. Mara whispered, "Dear God." The woman stared at the sheriff first, then Elias, then Mara. "You came back," she whispered. "We're here to help," Mara said softly. The woman laughed weakly. "That's what they always say." The sheriff stepped closer carefully. "Who did this?" The woman looked directly at him. "Men with badges first." Her eyes shifted toward the ceiling above them. Then ranchers, then the governor. Mara felt sick hearing the words spoken aloud underground. Ilias unlocked the cage slowly. "How long you been here?" The woman frowned like time no longer meant anything. Long enough to forget seasons. Mara removed her coat and wrapped it gently around the woman's shoulders. The woman suddenly grabbed her wrist hard. "You one of the wives?" Mara hesitate girls? Tears filled Mara's eyes. Sometimes the woman studied her for a long moment before letting go. "Then look now." Mara nodded slowly. No more silence, no more looking away. Further inside the tunnels they found birth records, transport lists, and graves hidden beneath loose dirt floors. Some burial pits held children buried together beneath broken boards marked only with numbers. The sheriff stood staring at one tiny shoe half buried in the dirt. "You gonna hide this too?" Elias asked. "No. They'll kill you. They already took everybody." A distant rumble echoed suddenly through the tunnels overhead. Horse hooves, several at once. The sheriff looked upward sharply. "We got company." They rushed back toward the silo entrance, with the old woman barely able to walk between them. Dawn light spilled faintly through the upper hatch now. Then Mara saw silhouettes waiting outside. Armed men surrounded the silos, and at the center, beside a dark horse, sat the governor himself watching the entrance calmly. Nobody moved. The governor removed his gloves slowly, while armed ranch hands leveled rifles toward the silo entrance. His face carried the calm expression Mara remembered from dinners at her table earlier. Like nothing beneath the ground mattered enough to disturb his appetite. The old woman beside her began trembling violently. "He keeps promises," she whispered. The sheriff stepped in front of the group with one hand near his revolver. Elias lifted his gun beside him. The governor smiled down at them from horseback. "Sheriff," he called, "you should left the dead buried." The governor stepped off his horse slowly, while rifles stayed pointed toward the silo entrance. Dust drifted around his boots. Calm sat on his face like none of the bodies underground belonged to him. "Well," he said softly, "this became ugly fast." The sheriff kept his revolver raised. "Don't move." The governor smiled faintly. "You finally pick a side after all these years?" "I picked it the day my sister vanished." The armed ranch hands shifted nervously around them while dawn light spread across the dead fields. Mara stood beside the old woman from the tunnels, holding her upright as Elias watched every rifle carefully. The governor looked toward Mara first. "Mrs. Bell, you look exhausted. Don't speak to me. You've been through a terrible shock. You buried women underground." The governor sighed almost sadly. "You see, this is what panic does." He turned toward the ranch hands. "Her husband disappeared and now grief has infected the whole county." Ilias stepped forward immediately. They found cages from old war storage, bones, animals, children. The governor's eyes hardened slightly now. "And you are still a murderer pretending to be a hero." Several ranch hands looked at Elias differently after that. The governor pointed calmly. That man deserted enforcement years ago after killing a deputy during transport duty. Elias said nothing. He's dangerous, the governor continued. Half the county hunted him once. Mara looked toward Elias sharply. That true? Yes. You killed a deputy? Yes. The governor spread his hands slowly. You see? Criminals protecting criminals. The old woman suddenly stepped forward out of Mara's grasp. Her body shook badly, but her voice carried across the field anyway. No. Everyone looked at her. She pointed directly at the governor. You did this. The governor's smile faded slightly. You brought girls down there yourself, she whispered. I saw you. One ranch hand lowered his rifle uncertainly. The governor laughed softly. That woman's barely coherent. You burned my sister, the old woman shouted suddenly. You made us watch. Silence hit the field hard after that. The governor's calm cracked for the first time. That's enough, he snapped. The sheriff stepped closer immediately. Nobody lower their guns. Mara stared at Elias now. Tell me the truth. Elias kept his revolver low. Years ago they moved a wagon with 6 girls inside. His voice stayed flat and tired. One child got sick during transport. The governor looked away. She couldn't walk anymore, Elias continued. Deputy said leave her in the woods. Mara whispered, What did you do? I tried taking all of them. The sheriff watched him carefully now too. One deputy stopped me, Elias said. So I shot him and the girls, 3 escaped. 2 died before sunrise. He swallowed hard. One was already dead before we moved her. Nobody spoke. The governor's voice turned cold again. And now you pretend morality? I never pretended. You think killing one deputy erased what you helped build? No. The sheriff finally grabbed handcuffs from his belt. Governor, you're under arrest. Several ranch hands immediately raised rifles higher. The governor looked almost amused again. You really think these people will follow you against me? One ranch hand spoke quietly. Sir! The governor turned sharply toward him. Put the gun up. The man hesitated. Fear moved through the group like sickness. Nobody trusted anyone anymore. The sheriff shoved the governor toward his horse. Move. You're making a mistake. You made it 20 years ago. They forced the governor back toward the ranch while armed riders followed at a distance. Smoke still drifted from the burned barn when they arrived. Half the structure remained standing, blackened and crooked against the morning sky. Townspeople had gathered again near the fences. Nobody cheered seeing the governor in handcuffs. Most looked terrified. The governor saw it too. Look at them, he told Mara quietly. They know what happens after this. You mean justice? I mean hunger. Mara stopped walking. The governor faced her carefully now. You think your husband acted alone? He asked. Half this valley ate because those routes stayed open. You knew. I survived. You fed them women to wolves. I fed my family. Mara slapped him hard enough to turn his head sideways. Nobody moved afterward. The governor slowly looked back at her. Not angry, almost disappointed. You still don't understand how this place works, he said quietly. The sheriff shoved him forward again toward the well. Keep moving. A gunshot cracked suddenly across the yard. One townsman dropped beside the fence screaming. KOs exploded instantly. Ranch hands opened fire from horseback while people scattered across the property. Elias grabbed Mara down behind a water trough as bullets shattered wood around them. Stay low, he shouted. The sheriff dragged the governor toward the well while firing back one-handed. 2 ranch hands fell from their horses near the barn entrance. Smoke rolled thicker across the ranch from burning hay still smoldering inside the ruins. Another gunshot hit the trough inches from Mara's head. Elias fired twice toward the fence line. Then pain slammed through him. He staggered backward against the trough with blood spreading fast through his shirt. Mara grabbed him immediately. No, I'm all right. You're bleeding. Still breathing. Another rider charged toward them through the smoke. Mara grabbed Elias's revolver before he could lift his arm fully and fired wildly. The horse reared hard, throwing the rider sideways into the dirt. Mara stared at the gun in shock. Elias looked at her once. Good shot. The sheriff forced the governor down beside the well, while bullets ripped through porch railings nearby. Call them off, the sheriff shouted. The governor coughed through drifting smoke. You think they obey me now? Another ranch hand appeared near the burned barn with a rifle aimed directly at the sheriff's back. Mara saw him first. Down, she screamed. The sheriff dropped barely in time as Elias fired from beside the trough. The rider collapsed backward into the fire-blackened dirt. Elias nearly fell after the shot. Mara caught him again. Stay with me. I ain't dead yet. The governor suddenly twisted free and tried running toward the horses. The sheriff tackled him hard beside the well stones and jammed the revolver against his jaw. You remember Clara? The sheriff growled. The governor froze. You remember my sister begging? Smoke swallowed half the yard now while townspeople fled screaming toward the fields. The remaining ranch hands backed away uncertainly without leadership or orders. The governor's voice finally broke. Please. The sheriff pressed the gun harder beneath his chin. Not one prayer from you. The governor looked toward Mara desperately. Tell him. She stared back without expression. Behind her, Elias struggled to stay conscious while blood soaked through his fingers onto the dirt. The governor's breathing turned uneven now. I can still help this town. You poisoned it, Mara whispered. The sheriff dragged him closer to the edge of the well, while smoke rolled thick around them from the ruined barn nearby. The governor stumbled against the stones, coughing hard as firelight flickered across his terrified face now. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, he looked small, human, afraid. The sheriff forced him onto his knees beside the black water below, while chaos still echoed across distant fields around them slowly. The sheriff forced the governor onto his knees beside the well, while smoke rolled across the ranch in thick black waves. Fire still crawled through the broken barn behind them. Horses screamed somewhere beyond the fields. Townspeople stood frozen near the fences, watching the governor cough dirt onto the stones. Listen to me, the governor rasped. You don't understand what happens after this. The sheriff pressed the revolver harder against his head. Talk. I can give names. Talk. Land deeds, bank records. Every ranch tied to the roots. Mara stood beside Elias while blood soaked through the stranger's shirt onto the dirt. He could barely stay upright now, but he still kept one hand near the revolver resting across his leg. The governor looked toward Mara desperately. Your husband owned parcels near the river. Those become yours now. Stop talking to me. You'll lose everything. I already did. The sheriff grabbed the governor by the collar and dragged him higher against the well stones. Tell them what you built. Smoke drifted between the gathered townspeople while nobody dared leave. The governor swallowed hard. Transport routes moved through grain silos first. Louder girls came from rail camps, orphan wagons. His breathing shook unevenly now. Ranchers paid for labor. Mara stared at him without blinking. The sheriff shouted, What happened to the ones who fought back? The governor closed his eyes briefly. Some were sold elsewhere, and the others. Silence. The sheriff slammed the revolver against his jaw. Say it. They buried them. A murmur spread through the crowd. One older rancher stepped backward immediately. Lord above. The governor pointed weakly toward several men near the fence. They helped. Those men tried leaving at once. The sheriff fired a warning shot into the dirt beside them. Nobody moves. The governor kept speaking now like fear had finally split him open. Names spilled out through blood and smoke. Ranch owners, deputies, judges, wagon drivers, burial locations hidden beneath fields and dry creek beds. Mara watched the faces in the crowd change one by one, some angry, some ashamed. Some simply relieved the truth no longer belonged only to them. The old woman rescued from the tunnels stepped closer through the smoke. Tell them about the children. The governor looked away. Tell them. His voice cracked. They used the small ones for leverage. Mara felt sick hearing it aloud. The sheriff's hand trembled around the gun now. Not rage anymore. Exhaustion. So all this time, he whispered, you fed girls into the ground and called it business. The governor started crying quietly. "I did what men before me already built. You kept it alive. I had a family. So did they." The sheriff looked toward the well beside them. Dark water waited below without reflection. "My sister begged," he said softly. The governor could not answer. For a long second, nobody moved. Then the sheriff pulled the trigger. The shot echoed across the ranch. The governor collapsed sideways against the stones before sliding still into the dirt. Silence followed immediately except for the fire. Mara closed her eyes briefly. She expected relief. Instead, she only felt tired. The sheriff stared at the body for several seconds. Then he sat slowly beside the well like his legs finally gave out beneath him. Elias tried standing. Pain bent him forward instantly. "You need a doctor," Mara said. "No time. There's always time. Not after this." Gunfire echoed faintly somewhere beyond the northern fields. Loyal ranch hands regrouping in the distance, Ilias looked toward the sound. "You need to leave before they come back." Mara shook her head. "No, you stay here, you die. I ran my whole life." The sheriff suddenly laughed once under his breath. Empty. Broken, Mara turned toward him. "Sheriff?" He kept staring into the well. "I spent 20 years pretending patience was justice," he murmured. "Truth is, I was scared. You tried." "No, I hid." His eyes drifted toward the governor's body nearby. "Same as everybody else." He slowly lifted the revolver again. Mara stepped forward immediately. "Don't." The sheriff smiled faintly without looking at her. "My sister's down there somewhere." "You don't know that." "I do." Elias pushed himself upright despite the blood loss. "This town still needs somebody." "No," the sheriff whispered. "It needs witnesses." Before either of them reached him, the sheriff placed the revolver beneath his chin and fired. Mara flinched hard at the sound. The sheriff's body slumped sideways beside the well stones where his sister had likely vanished decades earlier. Nobody in the crowd screamed. Most simply lowered their heads. The ranch fire spread farther across the property, while smoke swallowed the porch roof and half the fence line. Several townspeople finally moved toward the burning structures, carrying buckets and blankets. Others stood frozen beside the exposed ledgers stacked near the porch. Mara looked around at all of them. "No more hiding," she said. "Nobody," argued. The old woman from the tunnels stepped beside her. "There are more graves south of the river." Another woman near the fence nodded slowly. "And near the cotton fields." Mara looked toward Elias. "Help me bring them out." Weeks passed after the fire. The governor's crimes spread beyond the valley once the ledgers reached neighboring towns. Men disappeared overnight. Some fled. Others were dragged from homes by families who finally understood what had happened to missing daughters and sisters. The ranch changed slowly afterward. Workers covered graves near the silos first, then beneath old wagon roads, then beside dried wells hidden across neighboring properties. Mara stayed for every burial, every name, every ribbon tied back together beside fresh crosses. Ruth returned twice a week with food and bandages. She stopped asking questions after the graves started opening. Sometimes townspeople arrived carrying letters or pieces of clothing they recognized from missing relatives. Mara wrote every name down. She refused to let anybody disappear again. At night she heard the house settling around her, but the sounds no longer felt like warnings. They felt like memory loosening its grip. By the end of summer, the ranch stood half-burned and strangely quiet. The ruined barn remained open to the wind. No more footsteps circled the house at night. No more humming drifted through the trees. One morning, Mara swept the porch again beneath pale sunlight. The old bloodstains were finally gone from the wood. Elias stepped outside, carrying a travel bag over one shoulder. His wound had mostly healed, though he still moved carefully. "You got someplace to go?" Mara asked. "No." She leaned the broom against the porch rail. "Then stay." Elias looked toward the open fields beyond the ranch. For the first time in years, no riders watched from the fences. No secrets waited beneath the floorboards. Only wind moving softly through tall grass, where children's voices now echoed faintly from the distant fields beyond the house.